Swamiji often talked about culture. So that's the reason I thought this is a very important subject or topic that we can discuss and spend some time trying to understand what Swamiji meant by that statement. Okay, so the statement is culture is carried over on a foundation of the way you live life. So he's telling us, okay, if the way you live is not proper, the culture does not get carried on properly. It gets broken down and lost. Okay. So this is a statement that Swamiji made in the US when a number of devotees gathered there, and then they were asking different questions of Swamiji, on different topics. Okay. So, I mean, first of all, if you want to understand this or even elaborate on this, actually, we need to understand what culture is. Because Swamiji is talking about culture, and Swamiji is saying that the way we live life now, all of us, that forms the foundation on which the culture can get carried over to probably the next generation, like that. So that culture has to continue across generations. Okay. So for that to happen, Swamiji is telling us that we have to live our life properly so that the foundation is strong, the foundation is good, and the culture can get carried over that properly. Okay. And then he also says that if we don't live our life properly, so the foundation gets weak. Okay. And so the culture cannot get carried over such a bad foundation or a weak foundation. Okay. So it gets broken down and it gets lost. Okay. So it is actually very important for us to understand what Swamiji was referring to when he said culture. Okay. Now, the Sanskrit word and the same word, the same term, the Sanskrit term is what is used in most of our Indian languages, whether it is Telugu or Hindi or Kannada. I mean, I don't know about Tamil and other languages, but at least in these three languages, we use the word Samskruti. Okay, so Samskruti in Sanskrit means culture in English. Okay, so that is what Swamiji is referring to. In these days, especially in the IT sector, we call it the best practices. Okay, so best practices as applicable to business, the same, I mean, not the same, but best practices as applicable to life itself. I mean, the day-to-day life. So some practices have been found to be good over the generations by our fathers, grandfathers, mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers. So those practices have been standardized and continued by generations, one after the other, right? So he's saying a collection of those practices is what is called as culture. See, just to trigger some more discussion, I would like to compare that word. We are talking about Samskruti here, culture, but we also talk about Dharma, right? Say, for example, when we say Sanatana Dharma, I mean, today it's being called as Hinduism, but we don't agree with that. Swamiji never agreed that, that's a religion. So Swamiji used to say, it is Dharma, Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana is ancient. Okay. And Dharma is explained as, again, a way of life. Okay. Now we are saying that Dharma is way of life. Then we need to be able to differentiate that from culture, right? Culture is also a way of life, or at least Swamiji is linking culture to the way we live life, right? So what is the difference between Dharma and culture? Again, we also talk about tradition, okay, which in Sanskrit, again, it's called samskara, okay? Then how is culture different from tradition? Tradition is also passed on from one generation to the next, right? So what exactly is the difference between tradition and culture? Tradition and dharma, dharma and culture. I mean, I just thought of these three terms because Sandhya Didi asked me to elaborate on this statement made by Swamiji. So I've been thinking about this. So I'll just share a couple of my ideas and then we'll go ahead into actually what Swamiji talked about with reference to culture. Okay. See, my understanding, I mean, this is not what Swamiji told me. Okay, please don't confuse this with what Swamiji said. Okay, this is only I am trying to understand what could be dharma, samskruti, and samskara. What are the differences? Okay, so this I am trying to understand from whatever I have learned, whatever I have read, all that. Okay, my current understanding is dharma is the minimum set of rules that people have to follow in the social life. Okay, see, every one of us, every individual, he or she is an individual, he or she has his own life, her own life, but then we are also part of a society. Okay, so in the society, to make sure that everyone is happy, there are not too many problems. Okay, how we live, all of us together, how we live as a society, to make sure that that is smooth, that there are no problems, there are a set of rules that have been defined. So everyone has to follow these rules, and these are the minimum set of rules. Okay, so that is what I think is referred to as dharma. Okay, dharma cannot be broken. There are rules which everyone has to follow and follow very strictly. This is what our ancestors have taught us. Okay, and who evolved these? I mean, we are fortunate that in India, what we call as Sanatana Dharma, the origin is from the teachings of the rishis and the munis, right? People who have performed years and years of tapas. Okay, so what is coming in here is not just life across generations, but also life that is from other worlds. Okay, so it's not a question of whether we are happy, satisfied with our life here in this world, the physical life. It also includes rules and best practices which will help us be happy in the other worlds. Okay, that means what? We not only do we believe that we have to live life happily here, all of us, whether you are a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or a Sikh or you belong to any religion, still you talk about an afterlife. We talk about something called a judgment day, right? I mean, you have to go and be answerable to God. That is there in every religion. It could not have come into every religion if it was not a truth. So, irrespective of which religion we are in, which God we worship to, we are answerable to God once we leave this world and move on to the next world, okay? Or move on to the next birth. Somewhere there is a point where God will question us and we need to answer to Him. We are accountable there, okay? So, this concept has also been brought into our Dharma, in the Sanatana Dharma, okay? Now, having said this, now what is culture then? Okay, we are saying culture is also a way of life. I mean, again, this is just my understanding. What I think now, what I feel now is that dharma is the basic minimum, like pass marks. Unless you get 35 marks in every subject, you cannot pass the 10th standard. You cannot go to the next class. You will have to repeat the class. Okay, so that's the minimum that is required. But there are students who get first class because they have exceeded the minimum requirement. They are doing much better than the minimum required performance. And then there is also a distinction, right? People who do even much better than first class. Okay, so my understanding is culture is that part, okay, where you exceed the minimum requirement and do much better and much better. So there is always scope for improvement, right? Wherever we are, whatever we are doing, whichever profession, whatever way of life we are leading, there is always scope for improvement. Okay. So where we are trying to explore those ways, where we can improve the life even further. That is what I think is culture. Okay. So what our ancestors have taught us is that over generations we need to evolve that and then get better and better. From past class, from just passing over to the next class, we need to pass in first class. We need to pass in distinction. So that difference above the minimum requirement is what I am trying to understand as culture. I am trying to bring in two things here, right? One is not only the worldly life, adhyatmika, whatever is related to the spirit. So automatically devotion gets into it, God, spirit, okay, rebirth, all these things get into it. And we cannot ignore that. So that is also part of life, right? Okay. Now, so that is one aspect of it where it's not just the worldly life, but we are including everything. Okay. Beyond this physical world, beyond this worldly matter, there is a spiritual world which we need to take into account when we are living our life. Okay. Now, besides that, I am also saying that there are people who are basically following the rules. They have not broken any rules, but they're not really very good. There are others who not only break rules, but they perform much better than just the minimum requirement. Okay, so that is what I am referring to as culture. Understand? The better performance. Here, what I mean by performance is how happy or how satisfied, okay, we are with life. The wholesome life. I'm not talking about just one part of life. No, I mean, it cannot be just having money, right? Otherwise, the richest could have been the happiest. That's not the case. We see that every day. Okay, it's not just riches, it's not just the means. As our sages and rishis have pointed out, what is important is the inner peace, right? Atma Shanti. Now, what is the way of life that will help us get more and more Atma Shanti and less of trouble? Okay, so that's what I am trying to define as culture. Again, this is my understanding. If anybody would like to add to that or disagree with that, I am fine with that. Okay. See, because this is not Swamiji's teaching. Now, when it comes to Swamiji's teaching, there is no tolerance. Okay. Whatever Swamiji said is right, is right. Whatever Swamiji, if he has said it is wrong, it is wrong. That's all. We need to agree to that. We need to go by that. We need to follow that. Because he is our guru and he's telling us for our own good. Okay, so having said that, now I would like to just say a couple of sentences about the tradition part. Okay, now the tradition is in a particular family. Okay, so there could be a tradition of how things are done, but that may depend on how wealthy the family is or not, what resources the family has. So there could be some practices which are followed by the family members, but that may not be necessary for other families to follow. It depends on their situation, right? I mean, I'll just give you an example, which is actually a bad practice. Okay, but it had its time. I'm referring to the practice of dowry. Dowry is not dharma. Dowry is not culture. Dowry is a part of tradition. Okay, families where the sons inherited all the wealth, all the land, the kingdoms, the business, everything. Okay, and the daughters did not get anything in those days from the parents. So the concept of dowry evolved. So at the time of the wedding, the daughters are given some amount from the family wealth, from the family business, from the family's resources. Okay, so that the daughters can also lead a good life. Okay, now over time it was misused and it became a bad practice. So I'm just giving you an example of that, right? Of course, in the same way, there are lots of other practices which are followed during weddings and during other social functions, which are traditions. They are not dharma, they are not culture. Okay. Now, there is just another point. I mean, I'm trying to differentiate between culture and civilization. An easy example is if I eat with a spoon and somebody else is eating with his fingers, am I more cultured? Just because I'm eating with a spoon and a fork? No, that is only civilization, right? I am more civilized than probably the other person. That's not culture. Okay. So in that sense, I mean, again, now this is a definition that I got from the internet. People have defined that culture and civilization are two sides of the same coin. Okay, where civilization has to do with materials, tools, technology. Okay, big house, very convenient house, air conditioned house. Okay, nothing's like that. I mean, but there are other people who cannot afford that, but that doesn't mean that they are not culture. Okay, so there again, there is a differentiation between culture and civilization. I wanted us to be clear about that also, right? Okay. Now let us go into what Swamiji has talked about. He talked about two important aspects of life that impact culture very much. Okay. And he had a very strong advice on those two things. Okay. But again, let me repeat that in my opinion, culture, as referred by Swamiji, okay, it boils down to devotion and our relationship with God. Okay, I have reasons why I say that. So let's see if we get time, we can I can also elaborate on that. Okay, but I feel that's the core part of culture. Okay, if we ignore that, then there's no culture at all. Okay, so ultimately that is what we are trying to accomplish. That's what we are trying to achieve. Okay, so this is again my understanding. Okay, but now let us get into exactly what Swamiji said and why he made that statement. Okay, I know of two aspects that he referred to, so let me expand on those two aspects. Any other questions at this point? Okay.
I have a question, Uncle.
Ah.
So, do we need to give more importance to culture than civilization? So, I have given an example like eating with spoon is like civilized than with hand. But if I had more benefits with eating with hand, so we can forgive that eating with spoon and we can take the practice of eating with hand. Likewise, can we correct the civilization if it is goes wrong?
Yeah. See, as I said, civilization can change each time the technology changes, right? I mean, there was a time when we all lived in a different kind of homes, right? We lived in huts. And then slowly the technology evolved. And now we are living in RCC buildings. Okay, now in those days, RCC buildings did not exist. But that doesn't mean that culturally we are now better. No. We are more civilized, probably. Okay, we are more cleaner. We are more neater. We have a lot of convenience. We have washing machines, we have air conditioners, we have refrigerators. Okay, but that is all civilization. That's not culture. Okay, so I just wanted to differentiate that so we don't get confused with civilization. Okay, so culture is very different from that. Culture is the non-materialistic part of the social evolution, the change that is coming in the social society or the social life. Okay, for improvement, whatever is non-material is that is what is culture, is what I'm saying. Okay, again, it's not my definition. I got it from the internet. I like that definition, so I am going by that. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so let me get into what Swamiji talked about. Okay, the first point that Swamiji talked about as regards the way of life which will impact culture is that people have to take care of their parents. People have to take care of their elders. People cannot just ignore their parents once they become old. Once they get aged, the youngsters cannot just ignore them. That's a very important part of life, social life, right? That Swamiji talked about. Now, what made him talk about this is an interesting incident that happened. I think this happened on his first trip to the UK in 1987. And Swamiji himself told us this. So he told us that one afternoon he was lying on the bed and probably he was asleep, probably after lunch or after breakfast, whatever, in his room where he was hosted in UK. Suddenly he heard some commotion on the road. Okay, a lot of shouting and all that. So I mean, he could make out that there are a lot of people on the road. So he got up from his bed and peeked out of the window or the door, whatever was there, and he was surprised to find that there are a lot of people, very aged people, on the road going in a procession. Okay, I mean, Swamiji told us that there were people in wheelchairs who were a part of that procession, and they were shouting slogans, they had placards displayed. We know that Swamiji didn't read English, right? So he called someone who was there in the house and he asked that person, "What's happening here? Why are all these old people on the road? What are they demanding? What is the procession for?" So the person explained to Swamiji, these are all old people who are now pensioners, meaning they depend on the pension they get from the government for their livelihood, for their life, whatever they require, food, medicine, shelter, whatever. They have to depend on the pension that is given by the government. And now they are taking out a position demanding that that pension should be increased. Because whatever pension they are getting now is not sufficient to lead a comfortable life. So they are asking for the pension to be increased so that they can be more comfortable. Swamiji told us that he was shocked. He said, why is this? I mean, why does this happen in a developed country like UK? I mean, as we Indians think that UK is a rich country, right? Europe is a rich continent. All nations are rich there. Then how come these old people are having this trouble? They have to go on the streets in a procession demanding for an increase in the pension. Why do they have to do it? Don't their children take care of them? Why do they have to depend on the pension? So Swamiji's host explained to Swamiji, no, Swamiji, people in London or in UK or probably in Europe, I don't know, and I'm just trying to generalize it, do not take care of their parents. And again, Swamiji was very shocked. I mean, why? Why don't the children take care of their parents in the old age? So the reply that was given to Swamiji, and he was again shocked by that reply. He says the reply was, but Swamiji, these people who are now on the road in the procession, they have not taken care of their elders. They did not take care of their parents. So how can they expect their children to take care of them? Okay, so again, Swamiji was shocked. I mean, what is it? What is this way of life? Children don't take care of their parents here. But why? Because they didn't take care of their parents. So that is when he made the statement saying that the very foundation is bad here. The very foundation of social life is bad here. Okay, he said children have to take care of their elders. Okay, and I think after that, he brought up this matter on purpose when he was having a discussion with the local devotees. See, this incident happened when he was in the bedroom, right? I mean, he was in his room, he was actually sleeping, and he got awakened by this disturbance on the road, and he understood this point. Then, after that, when he was discussing with devotees there, the local devotees there, he intentionally raised this point. And then he asked them, don't you take care of your parents? They said, no. Why? The government takes care of them. But why don't you take care of them? They said, but they didn't take care of their parents. So why should we? Then Swamiji told them, no, this is the wrong way of life. Okay? Your parents did something wrong when they did not take care of their parents. But that doesn't mean that you have to continue the same thing, the same wrong. Please correct that. Please start taking care of your parents. It is your duty. Okay? Now, this advice Swamiji gave again and again in UK as well as in USA. Whenever he got an opportunity to advise the devotees, he kept repeating this advice. Now, let us just, again, this is a thought which came up in my mind as I was thinking about this point. Has any of you seen any animal taking care of its parents?
No.
One instance, never, right? But so many of us have seen, and there are so many videos, pictures of animals and birds taking care of their young. Then how come that animals don't take care of their parents? Okay. Now, so that has to be the difference between human beings and animals. When animals grow, they grow aged, they're left to die. They are left to fend for themselves and then die. That's all. They die a miserable death. Their children don't provide them with food and whatever else is required. Human beings cannot be like that. If we are human beings, then we have to take care of our parents. They provided for us, they took care of us, they gave birth to us. Without their help, we couldn't have been what we are today. So it is our duty to take care of our parents. Okay, this Swamiji repeated many times, and he made sure that his devotees, I mean, those who listened to him, who followed his advice, they took care of their parents. Okay, so this is the first example or first point that Swamiji talked about, where he said, unless children take care of their parents in the old age, the culture doesn't get carried on. And then we can go into the details, as to what all advantages we have in a joint family. When I say a joint family, here I'm talking about living with grandparents. Okay, when the grandmother and grandfather live with the children, live with the grandchildren, how the best practices can get, okay, conveyed across the generations, right? I mean, we can again go into that detailed discussion as to what are all the plus points in that. Of course, there are some negative points. I'm not saying no, but look at the positive aspects of that, right? And how the learning, again, I told you, culture is mainly to do with God and devotion, spirit, Atma. Okay. That knowledge can come from parents. The knowledge which is, again, when I say devotion, when I say God, we are talking of Rama and Krishna, right? We are talking of Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Vashishta. Now, in India, the practice has been that it is the grandfathers and grandmothers who told these stories from Ramayana and Mahabharata to the grandchildren. That is how I learned stories of the Mahabharata and Ramayana. My grandmother used to tell me those stories. Tell all of us, all my siblings, my cousins, she used to narrate those stories. And I know that is what happened in every house. I mean, but I'm talking about like 50 years ago. Okay, I don't know what is happening today. Today, I think all people are getting these stories from the TV channels. Okay, right. So this is one aspect that Swamiji stressed a lot. Okay, and he made it a point to advise devotees about this. There is another aspect of this. I mean, there is another aspect which Swamiji talked about, and he said that is also very important for culture to be carried forward. So that is another aspect of life, and that is also very important. I mean, it's quite obvious that it is important. Once I discuss that, it should be obvious. The point that Swamiji made was a person will have to choose one partner for life, and only one partner throughout his her entire life. Okay, I am talking about husband and wife. So Swamiji used to very clearly tell us that we should not change our life partners. I mean, husbands and wives, they should not change. They should not divorce. They should not get remarried again or live with a number of people. Swamiji was very much against that. Okay, openly he used to tell devotees, again in such gatherings, in meetings, he said, one partner, live with one partner throughout your life. Okay. Now we can easily imagine, what will happen when a person keeps changing his partners or her partners. Okay. The first impact is on the person's life itself. Okay. But then the real impact is on the children. Okay. Even I keep talking about this because Swamiji talked about this. Okay. Earlier we talked about civilization. Now just think of this. I mean, I had been to the US a number of times, to the UK also a number of times. Okay, here on the streets, I see children who are hardly dressed. I mean, they may have one piece of cloth, maybe a shorts, or sometimes not even that. Okay, I'm talking about little children. But the happiness in their faces, the glee, the happiness the way they play with other playmates and all that, they're enjoying life so much. They're always laughing. They're always playing with some children or the other. Okay, I'm talking about the poor families who almost live on the streets. Okay, they may have a room or a hut to actually live in, but they spend their whole time on the road. They don't have great food to eat. They are malnutrition. They don't have a very comfortable bed to sleep on. Okay, and they have to face everything, the cold, the heat, everything they have to face. But yet they are very happy. Now I am trying to compare these poor Indian street children with the children that I have seen in the US. Relatively very rich. They don't lack anything. They have enough to eat, enough to wear, very comfortable homes, very comfortable beds. But I did not see the happiness on their faces. Every child looks unhappy. Okay, and then when slowly, see, the advantage I had in traveling along with Swamiji was, what I'm trying to say is, compare that with an official trip. I had been to the US on official trips also. So you get to stay in a hotel, you just meet your colleagues, or you just meet the other people who are in the same professions. You don't get to meet the actual families, the actual people there, the actual members of the society, the majority members of the society. You don't get to meet them. So you don't really get to know how social life is in the US when you go on an official trip. But when I was traveling with Swamiji, I used to go and stay at their homes, right? I used to mingle with people there, with children there. And then all the devotees used to come to the programs. They used to bring their children along. So that is how you get to know what is actually the social life in those countries. Okay, so this surprised me very much. And then gradually, over the several trips that I had, I learned that most of the children, I cannot say everyone, but then most of the children in the US, they don't have either their father with them or their mother with them. It is because people are changing their partners very often. Okay, so the child gets to be with either the mother or the father once they're separated. Okay, then there's a new partner, so there's a new father, then there's a new mother, and then it keeps happening several times during his lifetime, as he is growing up, as the child is growing up. Okay, so personally, I believe that even if the children in India, the street children in India, don't have enough food, don't have any comforts, they don't lack in the happiness because they have their both mother and father with them. They get to spend time with their mothers and fathers all the time. Okay, because here in India, we still practice that one single partner for life. It is changing now. Very unfortunate, very bad. Okay, I see that the professional community, these changes are coming in, the social changes are coming in. I hear about a lot of divorces, lot of remarriages and all that. That's not good for the society. Okay, so this is the other advice that Swamiji used to give. There have been arguments from those people, some of them, saying that Swamiji, this is our personal matter. It doesn't have an impact on anything else. Swamiji said, no, it's not your personal matter. It will affect the society. One is people have to take care of their parents in their old age. Second thing is a person has to have one partner of life partner for the whole life and should not change partners. Okay, so these two things are very important for the culture to be carried over. So these two things, there could be many other things, but then Swamiji stressed about these two things. So that is what I wanted to elaborate here. Okay, so these two are as important as the foundation of a building. So unless these two aspects of life are properly taken care of, culture does not get carried on from one generation to other generation, next generation. It gets destroyed. Okay, it gets broken up and destroyed.